Grandfather let his grandson choose a seed. He planted hope where everyone saw dead land. 20 years later, the seed that nobody believed in blossomed like a sacred tree. Now, with science, his grandfather's legacy, and an entire town behind him, Matthew discovers that roots also heal. Welcome to the channel. Before we begin, like and subscribe so we can keep creating stories like this one. When old Walter Morgan decided to hand over the small plot of land he had cultivated for decades, no one in the family showed any interest. The land on the outskirts of Pine Ridge was arid, unproductive, and, according to many, cursed by the drought that had plagued the region since time immemorial. Walter's children had migrated to Chicago in search of better opportunities, leaving behind the town that was slowly fading into oblivion. But Matthew, his 10-year-old grandson, a shy and curious boy who spent summers in the town, asked for something unusual during his last visit. He didn't want the land, he wanted to choose a seed. The old man smiled, finding amusement in the child's innocence, and allowed him to choose any seed to plant there, as if it were a passing game. The family laughed. The neighbors commented on the gesture as a childish whim. No one took it seriously. When Matthew walked to the local market and chose a different seed, one that, according to Mrs. Connie, the seller of herbs and traditional remedies, would not thrive in that region, not even with prayers to the Lord above. This seed is special. Child, it comes from distant lands. They say it only grows where there is true hope, the old woman had whispered, as she handed him the seed wrapped in an embroidered handkerchief. Still, Matthew planted it. He watered it every day with almost ritual dedication, even when the earth cracked from thirst and the summers seemed to punish any hope. Grandma Ruth, Matthew's grandmother, watched from her kitchen window how the boy talked to the earth as he poured water on that exact spot, like someone confiding a secret to a friend. Years passed. The land remained apparently the same. Dry, silent, useless. And with time, even Matthew grew up and left the town, taking with him only the memory of that gesture. His parents sent him to study in Boston, where he graduated in agronomy. Though he never practiced the profession, he ended up working for a corporation that had nothing to do with his youthful dreams. 20 years later, Pine Ridge faced economic collapse. The textile factory that supported many of the families had closed its doors, and young people, like Matthew himself, had migrated to the cities in search of a future. Empty houses, bankrupt businesses, and an air of abandonment dominated the scene. Grandma Ruth, now widowed and with wrinkles that told stories of son and work, refused to leave town. Every morning she swept the front of her house as if expecting important visitors. At night, she lit a candle for her deceased husband and another for her absent grandson. "He'll return," she would tell Rose Jenkins, her neighbor and only friend, left in town. "My Matthew has roots here, even if he doesn't know it yet." Meanwhile, in Chicago, Matthew Morgan faced a personal crisis. At 30, he had been fired from the company where he had worked since graduation. His girlfriend Ashley had left him for someone with greater ambition and less melancholy, in her own words. Without work, without love, and without direction, Matthew spent his afternoons contemplating the horizon from the small balcony of his rented apartment. It was then that he received a call from Rose Jenkins. "Your grandmother needs to see you, son. She's fine health-wise, thank God, but she says you have to come. There's something on your grandfather's land." The news seemed absurd, but Matthew had nothing to lose. He packed what little he considered important and took a bus to Pine Ridge, that place he had tried to forget. Upon arrival, the town seemed a ghost of what he remembered. The cobblestone streets remained, but the color and life had vanished. He walked to his grandmother's house, where he was received with a hug that smelled of cinnamon and thyme. "You've returned," said Grandma Ruth, as if confirming a prophecy. "Just in time." Matthew didn't understand what she meant until that afternoon, when his grandmother took him to the old plot of land. What he saw left him speechless. Where he had once planted a seed, now stood a tree. But not just any tree. It was a species he had never seen in his agronomy studies, robust with intense green leaves and flowers that gave off a sweet, almost hypnotic aroma. "It started growing a few months ago," explained Grandma Ruth. "At first we thought it was a weed, but when it gave the first flower, the birds returned. Then came the bees. And now, look." She pointed toward the horizon, where a small group of people with instruments and notebooks were taking notes near the tree. "They're scientists, from the University of Madison. They say it's a species that was believed extinct in America, something very valuable." Matthew approached the tree cautiously, like someone approaching an old acquaintance they fear not recognizing. He touched its bark and felt a strange tingling in his fingers. He remembered the child he had been, watering with blind faith a seed that everyone had given up on. "Do you know why your grandfather let you choose a seed?" asked Grandma Ruth, interrupting his thoughts. "There's something we never told you about this land." Matthew looked at his grandmother, intrigued. The sun was beginning to hide behind the mountains, bathing the town in golden and reddish tones. At that moment, one of the scientists approached them. "Are you the owner?" he asked with evident enthusiasm. "Mr. Morgan, your tree could change the future of this region. We need to talk to you urgently." Grandma Ruth squeezed her grandson's hand, as if warning him to be cautious. Matthew felt that he was at a crossroads. The past he had planted seemed to be germinating into an unexpected future, and he was just beginning to understand the magnitude of what he had initiated with a simple act of childhood faith. The following days in Pine Ridge passed like a whirlwind for Matthew. Dr. Edward Fields, leader of the research team, explained to him that the tree was a unique species. Sacred Ceiba, they called it. It was believed to be extinct since pre-colonial times and, according to Mayan legends, had extraordinary healing properties. Its leaves contain a compound that could revolutionize treatments for respiratory diseases, explained the scientist as he carefully took samples. It's a finding that has captured international attention. It wasn't long before journalists, more researchers, and most surprisingly, curious tourists who had heard rumors about the miracle tree of Pine Ridge arrived. The mayor, Gabriela Ortiz, an ambitious woman who had been about to abandon the crisis-stricken town, now saw an opportunity. "This could be the rebirth we needed," she declared at an improvised press conference in front of Grandma Ruth's house. "Eco-tourism will save our town." Matthew observed everything with a mixture of amazement and wariness. At night, sitting on the porch of his grandmother's house, he tried to process what was happening. It was during one of those nights when Grandma Ruth finally decided to reveal the truth to him. "Your grandfather bought this land when he was young, paying a very high price," she began, while serving 2 cups of hot chocolate. "It wasn't just any land. According to the elders, it was sacred ground, part of a forgotten temple where the indigenous people performed healing ceremonies." The old woman extracted from an ancient chest a bundle of yellowed papers and a worn diary. "Walter kept all of this. He never wanted to show it to anyone, not even his children. He said he would wait for the true heir, someone who would understand the real value of the land." Matthew spent hours reading the documents by the light of a lamp. He discovered that his grandfather had acquired the land from a landowner who was getting rid of unproductive lands. What the seller didn't know was that Walter had researched the history of the place with the town elders. "This land doesn't yield common fruits," said an entry in the diary, "but it holds secrets more valuable than any harvest." According to the writings, beneath that seemingly arid plot flowed an underground spring considered sacred by ancient civilizations. The water didn't reach the surface due to a layer of rock, but it nourished deep roots that could reach it. "Your grandfather spent years searching for the right seed," explained Grandma Ruth. "When you were a child and showed interest in planting something, he saw the sign he had been waiting for. He took you to the market knowing that Mrs. Connie would give you the correct seed." The revelation left Matthew shocked. All this time he had believed that his childish gesture had been a coincidence, a whim tolerated by an indulgent grandfather. Now he understood that he had been part of a greater plan, a legacy carefully preserved for him. Meanwhile, news of the miracle tree spread like wildfire. Offers came from pharmaceutical laboratories interested in acquiring exclusive rights to study and exploit the properties of the Ceiba. The State University proposed establishing a botanical research center in the town. Hotel entrepreneurs began buying abandoned properties to convert them into lodges for eco-tourists. Pine Ridge, which just weeks ago had been economically dying, now buzzed with activity and hope. However, not everyone viewed these changes favorably. A group of long-time residents led by Mike Vargas, the town baker, feared that commercialization would destroy the essence of the place. "This land has a soul," he declared at a community meeting. "We cannot sell it to the highest bidder." The controversy divided the inhabitants. Some saw the tree as an economic blessing, others as cultural heritage that should be protected from exploitation. In the midst of this conflict, Jack Heron appeared, a businessman originally from the town who had made his fortune in the capital. With an impeccable suit and a calculating smile, he presented himself at Grandma Ruth's house, offering an exorbitant sum for the land. "Think about it, Mrs. Morgan," he insisted with a honeyed voice. "With that money, you and your grandson could live comfortably for the rest of your lives." The old woman closed the door on him without hesitation, but Jack didn't give up. He began spreading rumors about the legality of the Morgans' property, insinuating that the purchase documents might not be valid after so many years. To further complicate matters, unexpected news arrived. Ashley, Matthew's ex-girlfriend, had seen his story on national news and decided to travel to Pine Ridge. "I always believed in you," she told him when they reunited, although Matthew perfectly remembered her parting words. Matthew's personal situation was becoming as complicated as the town's. On one hand, scientists and businessmen were pressuring him to make decisions about the future of the tree. On the other, old feelings and new loyalties pulled his heart in opposite directions. It was during this confusion that he met Carrie Davis, a local botanist who had been quietly studying the tree since its first buds. Unlike the foreign scientists, Carrie understood the connection between the plant and the land, between the past and present of the town. "This isn't just a scientific discovery," she explained as they examined the tree's roots together. "It's an awakening." Something in Carrie's sincerity resonated deeply with Matthew. They began spending time together, studying Walter's documents and exploring local traditions related to medicinal plants. Carrie showed him how the tree's appearance coincided with ancient forecasts about a time of renewal. "Your grandfather didn't just leave you a piece of land," she told him one afternoon as they watched the sunset next to the Sabre. "He left you a mission." That night, Matthew had a vivid dream. He saw his grandfather walking the land, planting invisible seeds that glowed beneath the earth. Upon waking, he made a decision. He gathered all interested parties, scientists, businessmen, authorities, and town residents. "Before deciding the future of the tree," he announced, "I need to fully understand its past." He proposed a 30-day period to investigate the ancient documents, thoroughly study the properties of the tree, and most importantly, consult with the few elders remaining in the region about traditions related to the sacred land. The countdown had begun, and as Matthew immersed himself in the research, a greater surprise awaited in the depths of his grandfather's diary, a revelation that would change not only his perception of the tree, but the complete history of Pine Ridge. The 30 days of investigation became a revealing journey for Matthew. Together with Carrie, he traveled to nearby towns seeking testimonies from elders who remembered the legends about the sacred land. In Greenfield, a centenarian healer told them about the veins of the earth, underground conduits of pure water, that the ancients considered the blood of the world. The seeds of the sacred sabre only germinate where these veins come close to the surface, he explained. They are guardians and signs of life. In the state library, they found ancient maps confirming the existence of a ceremonial center precisely where the tree now stood. Meanwhile, scientific analyses yielded surprising results. The sabre only had exceptional medicinal properties, but had begun to transform the soil around it. Where once there was arid land, native vegetation now sprouted, species thought to have disappeared. "It's as if the tree were awakening other plants," Dr. Fields commented in amazement. "I've never seen anything like it." But the most shocking discovery came from Walter's diary. In the last pages, written with a trembling hand shortly before his departure, The old man revealed the true origin of the land. He hadn't bought it from just any landowner, but from Jack Heron Sr. himself, who had tried to destroy the sacred site to build a distillery. Walter, descended from Native Americans on his mother's side, knew the value of the place and had sacrificed all his savings to protect it. "The land doesn't really belong to me," he wrote. "I am just its guardian until the one who must continue the legacy arrives." The revelation explained Jack Heron Jr.'s insistence on recovering the land. It wasn't just economic ambition, it was a pending family matter. When Matthew confronted Heron with this information, the businessman finally confessed. "My father always considered the sale of that land as his greatest mistake," he admitted. "On his deathbed, he made me promise I would recover it for the family." The conflict now took on deeper dimensions than the simple commercial value of the discovery. The 30-day period was coming to an end, and Matthew had to make a decision. The pressure increased from all sides. The laboratories raised their economic offers. The mayor pushed to turn the site into a tourist attraction. Ashley, who had re-established her relationship with Matthew, encouraged him to sell and start a new life together in the capital. Only Carrie remained quiet, respecting his internal process. The night before the official announcement, Matthew walked alone to the tree. The full moon illuminated the white flowers of the ceiba, creating an almost supernatural spectacle. He sat under its branches and closed his eyes, seeking clarity. It was then that he felt a presence. Upon opening his eyes, he saw Grandma Ruth approaching slowly. "Your grandfather came here every night for years," said the old woman, sitting beside him with effort. "He talked to the earth, told it his sorrows and hopes. He said that someday it would answer." Matthew looked at his grandmother with curiosity. "Do you think all of this was predestined, that I was meant to return?" Grandma Ruth smiled. "Your grandfather didn't believe in imposed destiny, but in chosen destiny. That's why he let you choose the seed. The land was already prepared, but you decided to plant it." In that moment, something clicked in Matthew's mind. He remembered Mrs. Connie's words when she gave him the seed. "It only grows where there is true hope." He understood that the real miracle wasn't the tree itself, but the chain of decisions and actions that had made it possible. The following morning, all of Pine Ridge gathered in the central square. National journalists broadcast live. Representatives from laboratories and universities waited with expectation. Matthew climbed onto the stage, accompanied by Grandma Ruth and Carrie. His decision surprised everyone. "This land and this tree don't belong to the Morgans," he began. "They never really belonged to us. They are the heritage of this land and those who inhabit it." He announced the creation of a community foundation that would protect the site and responsibly manage its benefits. The land would be declared a protected area, but scientific research would be allowed under strict ethical protocols. The economic benefits derived from potential medicines would be distributed among the community, with special emphasis on educational programs and environmental conservation. "We will not sell what cannot be possessed," he declared firmly, "but we will share what has been entrusted to us." The proposal generated mixed reactions. Some felt disappointed by the lost economic opportunity. Others applauded Matthew's vision. Jack Heron, surprisingly, was the first to approach and shake his hand. "My father would be proud," he admitted. "Maybe I was wrong about recovering the land. Perhaps what needed to be recovered was the original purpose of the earth." In the months that followed, Pine Ridge experienced a profound transformation. The Walter Morgan Botanical Research Center was established near the tree, generating jobs and attracting scientists from around the world. Local farmers, inspired by the land's rebirth, began implementing sustainable techniques based on ancestral knowledge. Tourism flourished, but in a respectful and conscious way. Matthew discovered his true vocation as a bridge between modern science and traditional wisdom. Together with Carrie, with whom he had developed a bond that transcended the professional, he established educational programs that taught the town's children to value and protect their natural heritage. Ashley eventually returned to the capital, understanding that their paths had definitely separated. The ceiba continued to grow majestic. Under its shade, Grandma Ruth told visitors the story of a boy who planted hope in barren land and of a man who returned to harvest it with wisdom. One afternoon, while Matthew and Carrie worked in the community nursery they had established, an unknown elder arrived. "I come from Cherokee territory," he explained. "I heard about your tree and brought this." In his wrinkled hand, he held a small bag of seeds. "They're from a species we thought was lost. Perhaps they can be reborn here, too?" Matthew took the seeds with reverence, remembering the child he once was. He looked at Carrie, who nodded with a smile. Together they walked to an empty space on the land, now green and fertile. As they dug small holes for the new seeds, Matthew understood that his grandfather's legacy wasn't just a tree or a plot of land, but an unbroken chain of hope extending into the future. Each planted seed was a promise. Each root growing in darkness was an act of faith. And as the sun set behind the mountains, bathing Pine Ridge in golden tones, Matthew knew he had found his place in the world, not as owner of the land, but as its temporary guardian, part of something much bigger and older than himself. The story of the miracle tree of Pine Ridge spread throughout America and beyond. It became a symbol of ecological resistance and community renewal. And although many spoke of the scientific miracle of the saber, those who knew the true story knew that the authentic miracle had been much simpler and deeper. A child who planted a seed when no one believed it would grow. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Matthew and the sacred saber has moved you and reminded you of the transformative power of hope and connection with our roots. To continue this emotional journey, we have prepared a special series of stories inspired by the traditions and mysteries of our deep America. Find it here by clicking to your left. If you liked this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give the video a like. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and the beauty of our traditions. Do you have any seeds that you've planted that are waiting to bloom? Or do you know stories of rebirth in your own communities? We're waiting for you in the comments to share your experiences and continue weaving together these stories that connect us with the most essential part of our humanity.